Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Joining us now, after extensive travel, thrilled he could find time to start us off this morning.
He was in
Daniel
Singapore
Ives.
yesterday.
He was in Singapore?
How do you get back to, like...
Yeah, the Gulf Stream. You know, he's got the Wedbush Gulf Stream, global head of technology for Wedbush. Dan, I want to look forward. What did you learn from Nvidia yesterday that's part of the AI story of the other 10 stocks?
I mean, it's all about Blackwell that's fueling. I mean, 11 billion. That shows, I mean, this is going to be on a trajectory of 15, 20 billion a quarter. So if you had any concerns, it's the opposite. Big tech, other enterprises, they're doubling down. That's the multiplier effect across tech. For every dollar spent on a Nvidia chip, $8, $10 spent across the rest of tech.
What is your x-axis? When you look at technology development, we'll talk to Mandeep Singh about this in a moment. Dan Ives, do you have a timeline out on Nvidia? Do you have a terminal value on Nvidia that's appropriate? 7 years? What is it?
I think 2 to 225 to me is ultimately going to be sort of the base case as this plays out. And again, you're not going to need like the massive blowouts. They stay on this trajectory. Outside of some black swan, and the bears will always hope for that, like they have the last decade. I think this is a $4 and ultimately a $5 trillion market cap as it plays out. Wow. There is one red phone in the world for these chips, and he's wearing a black leather jacket. His name's Jensen.
Dan, talk to us about just catalysts for this name. You know, it's really unusual for Nvidia shareholders to look down at their Bloomberg screen and see year-to-date stocks, you know, down a couple of percent here. Not to see a green on the screen here. What's the next catalyst, do you think, for this stock?
Yeah, look, I think catalyst now, clearly going forward, you're going to continue to focus on what Blackwell demand looks like, right? And Nvidia, you know, they'll have their conference in March. I think that's going to be a sort of spectacle. That's going to be another launching pad for Jensen, for Nvidia. And look, and I think there was all smoke, no fire. And I just continue, and we've talked about it on the show, DeepSeek is bullish for Nvidia and big tech. It's not the opposite, despite, you know, many of the bears yelling fire in a crowd theater. If
you're just joining us, folks, Mandeep Singh will be with us in a moment from Bloomberg Intelligence. We start with Daniel Ives of Wedbush, their head of technology. For those of you on Bloomberg Radio, it is critical to point out Ives with the Penn State Nittany Lions merch in the background.
Yes, exactly.
This morning. At Penn State, Dan Ives, they're going to have to do a rebuy of Apple technology. We had Mark Gurman in 4, 5, 6 days ago, and we started with a chip, and you know, it's like Mandeep Singh talk. And Dan Ives, Gurman was riveting about the technological veracity of the Apple story. Do you agree?
Oh, I think the best is yet to come, because and Gurman's talked about it as well, but the consumer AI revolution comes through Cupertino. They're a toll collector. China app, US app, Australian app, it doesn't matter. In other words, it's about that install base. I continue to think that is going to incrementally add $60 to $70 per share, the AI story, the incremental services. And that doesn't include new form factor chip and just more and more control of their ecosystem.
Dan, how did the company kind of position the DeepSeek issue as a competitor out there in the marketplace?
I think actually similar to the rest of big tech. It's a positive. The models, the more innovative the models get, the cheaper they get, the more use case, the more GPU capacity. In other words, like that's why, like that, because everyone here, and you guys talk about it all the time, like everyone's waiting for where's the cracks in the armor, smoke, is this the AI bubble? But we've talked about this $2 trillion in CapEx next 3 years. Big tech spend $330 billion this year. You could find cracks, but you're not going to find it here. And I think that's what you saw last night, you know, in terms of really the demand. There was I thought Jensen was actually more bullish than even what he was a few months ago.
Daniel Ives, thank you so much. Get some sleep. Too early. He's traveling worldwide.
I have no idea
Ives,
where he is.
With us with Wedbush. Well-rested Mandeep Singh joins us right now, senior technology analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. The distinction here, Mandeep, is Ives is doing buy, hold, sell, trying to make money. You're looking at the industry holistically. if I'm Satya Nadella and I'm listening to Nvidia yesterday, what did Microsoft learn from the Nvidia conference call?
Yeah, look, I think Dan mentioned about Blackwell ramping up nicely, contributed $11 billion in the quarter. So that means NVIDIA is really ramping up nicely with its new architecture. In fact, they laid out the plan for Blackwell Ultra. So they're moving very fast when it comes to the advances with the chips. The one, I would say, data point that didn't do very well was on the networking side. So they had a second sequential decline in networking revenue. And if I try to tie that in, with the size of clusters, again, in AI, there are these two main concepts, training versus inferencing. Training is driven by the size of clusters. And then if you have a bigger cluster, you have to network it in a way where it's coherent and you can use it for your training purposes. So the fact that NVIDIA's networking revenue declined sequentially, again, it's off a very strong base. It tells you that there may be a slight pause when it comes to building these bigger clusters, and NVIDIA is the most exposed to that trend. So from that perspective, I think you could ask yourself, given their valuation, I mean, clearly a lot is baked in terms of growth. And the out years is what everyone is worried about. Can NVIDIA sustain this momentum in the out years, 2027, 28, and beyond? And I don't think we got an answer last night in terms of how this could drive it. And the other data point I would call is the China sales. I mean, it's half of where it was before the export controls, and their guide doesn't bake in the fact that if tariffs go into effect, then it would be a much bigger hit on the gross margin, which actually fell 300 basis points.
So following up on that, Mandeep, how did Jensen Huang kind of characterize the whole tariff environment, the trade environment between China and the West?
Yeah, he didn't explain much, neither did the CFO, in terms of what could go wrong. I mean, as of now, what they said was China sales is half of before the export controls went into effect under Biden. And look, if they tighten the export controls, which is a very likely scenario given what we have heard from the administration, then China sales could go to zero by the end of the year. And when you think about upside, I mean, given NVIDIA has set this trend of beat and raises, which they did last night as well, you have to ask yourself, where will that upside come from if China sales, which was as big as 20% of their overall sales at one point, now it's much smaller, around 10%, will that have an impact in terms of the beat and raise trend?
Joining us on your commute across the nation, Mandeep Singh with us with Bloomberg Intelligence on your technology holdings.